our unified field really helps. It does. Like, it gives us the right direction. First, about your narrator. Why do I call myself your narrator when we're talking about political things? Well, because during the time period that all these things like happened that we're trying to talk about, your friend was in high school. Friend is a creative writer. Friends are artists. Friends are creative writers. That's who we are, people like that. I don't really know what breed of people this like social science crowd is. But what happens is, and certainly was happening in the 90s, it's part of this mass medicating and diagnosing of people with mental disorders. This crowd is monopolized expertise that involves studying everything like a social phenomenon by applying like scientific methods. Chomsky says, but the problem is they don't believe in anything; they're just studying it. Um, but they're informing people who may not realize how demented what they're doing is. So yes, they inform like law enforcement agencies about who's dangerous. We've done studies. Anyone who comes in with that much expertise can mislead all kinds of people and create all kinds of harm by because they work with our legal system. They work with the police. They inform people if what they're telling them is demented. No one would. It's very hard to know. They operate in this discourse of social science, much of which involves applying the sciences to explain away things that happen. Often their technique is to deploy psychoanalysis explanations. They work with law enforcement. They say, well, look, we've done studies. We know what this is. We know what that is. But they're not like they don't live in reality and they don't believe in anything. They're just studying it. But this crowd influenced much of what happened. They're in some sense were in control in the 90s. Like I said, this mass diagnosing of people with mental disorders who are basically just having problems started then. But I found out at the graduate school when I wanted to, like I said, I was originally a creative writer and all that. I became politically interested. Chomsky was sort of the girl said, he's kind of like a guru to the guys like you, Steve. Like, yeah, people who are like artists and stuff like that and everything. Certainly a guy like Shep Ferry did the Obama image everyone knows. He silk screened a T-shirt for me in high school. He lived on Angel Street in Rhode Island. In what way is he political? Well, the same reason a lot of my friends were. Like, he's political. He listens to Chomsky. People like us do. When I attempted to like look into certain things, I didn't realize. See, part of these things that happens is no one realizes at any given time what will happen in the universities or graduate schools should you even mention something. Certainly that's caused a number of terrible things, shootings and things like that. People encountered, they didn't know that people like who are interested in certain things are perceived as dangerous. By the way, being a loner is now considered being dangerous. But they're also writing book after book after book that distort the history of what happened when I was young. But they're much older than I. They have expertise. They're Chomsky and them will call. They're a coordinator class of people who are apart but have monopolized expertise, and it's very dangerous to do that because other people can't enter the discussion, and other people, I'd say, they're working with the police. They're working with these people. They can very badly mislead everybody about what's happening. I encountered them, and I couldn't believe they thought I was dangerous. I just simply couldn't believe it. I had no idea how they perceived people like myself, and it was very frightening. And it did lead to me ending up, in this like sort of psychiatry. I perceived to be kind of a cult, but no, the idea being like this person needs psychiatric help for the looking into such things. I didn't know how bad it was, and I didn't know all the books are written by these people. But these events are hard to talk about because they're tragic. And certainly you never want to justify someone who did a criminal act. But if it came out of fears and concerns about harm coming to other people, much like during the Vietnam era, there's a lot of people who are in jail now for something they did, that was essentially a criminal act. They said, well, we didn't know what to do. We just didn't know what to do to stop the war. Like, we haven't complained. That guy, what's his name? He says, I haven't complained much about my circumstances. He's been in prison for, something that happened, an attempt to do something in the 60s to stop the war. The fact that a lot of the people who were the victims of our internal security, see, it's the internal security forces, but operating on information given them by this social science class of people that is incredibly dangerous because they don't seem to live in reality. I mean, they don't. But how to approach tricky topics without influencing someone in a way where they themselves would become paranoid and maybe do something, take the wrong message from someone like your narrator. Well, that's just it. There is no one. There are very few people like my age who would explain what was taking place in a way that wouldn't. Right now, you have a lot of young people going psycho. You do on campuses and stuff when they find out things. It happens all the time. Because people like me don't have expertise, and we're not in the universities teaching. We don't have much access to such people. Students who are agitating in class will be sent to psychiatrists or thought to be a risk to do something. The idea would be to talk about these things, and explain that that things have explanations, but that there's no excusing a violent act. But we should know why it happened, because the events that led to such a thing are worth knowing, because it's worth knowing about history, but it's also worth making sure it never happens again. Because it was hard to know who was in power during the Clinton years. You could see by what the different wings of the administration did that they were being informed by people who just don't live in reality. But that's not you don't blame law enforcement agencies who are being fed crazy theories by these people, which you can't break into. They are experts. Their conclusions are we don't know where they're looking from. But Chomsky, that's the main thing he talks about, is these people. They claim to be just sort of liberal in the right. No, that much expertise, you can distort a bunch of things. These are the people who accuse everyone of being a racist, and I certainly took that after I was ejected from the graduate school. Right, no, I ended up in that psychoanalysis place where I was interrogated as the main thing is they thought I was a racist. And dangerous. Okay, so after that experience, it seems crucial to try and say gosh, I wish I could tell young people about that time period so that doesn't happen again, because these people that are creating something, we have an emergency. We have an emergency on our hands, is the way people like me perceive it. But how to approach it in a way that you don't frighten it, that you don't do what other people are doing. Quite frankly, a lot of these professors who claim to be radicals that are making young people think psychotic things when these things have. I'm not a college teacher. I'm not in the university system. A lot of what your narrator talks about is how out of touch with the reality the universities are and how much harm is created by them not understanding things. And the events that happened when I was young, when I was older, I wanted to put them in context. And people like me who are artists and writers follow Chomsky. That's where your friend is coming from. But why people like me, once we get to a graduate school, are called right-wing nuts and dangerous and this and that, that's a problem. It's one of the many problems about that you can't talk about the history of the country or look into what was happening during the time you were growing up without, being called by security offices who naturally are getting these social science people saying, we know who's dangerous and who's not. That guy's a loner and he wrote a paper, so we have to have security officers call him. That's very frightening for a person like me. That's where this is coming out of. Let me just stop there, and I think it's time for bed. But our unified field helps people like me to try and do this activity in a way where we could talk about things that are important to us, but in a way that doesn't cause any more harm than is already coming to people. By the way, these things about, on the kids, I met young kids who are speaking on campuses, they're terribly confused. I mean, they're hearing things like there are FEMA camps coming, there's this coming, there's a global government coming. They're being told things that make them paranoid. Um, that was part of why I was doing all that writing on Facebook. It was for young people. People like me are concerned about certain kinds of young people, particularly young men who are troubled, to make sure they don't go off the deep end. This is what's happening, but it's not something you have to, it's worth talking about. Is the point. Let's stop there, because I don't even know that I'm on the right track with what we're doing. I really don't. But this is what our unified field prompted me to say at this time.